The International Association for Near-Death Studies presents NDE Radio, a weekly exploration of near-death experiences and similar encounters with the other side. Now, here's your host, Lee Witting.
Welcome to NDE Radio, brought to you on behalf of IANS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. I'm your host, Lee Witting. Today's guest, Roland Achenjang, grew up in Cameroon, West Africa. His exposure to the cultures in Cameroon, America, and other parts of the world were enriching, but also a source of confusion about life on planet Earth. For over 28 years, he questioned all of it through his Catholic teachings, local folklore understandings, diverse cultural beliefs, pharmacy education, and even a business school master's degree. In frustration, he taught himself to meditate in 2013, 2014, and had a spiritually transformative experience on August 21st, 2018. The experience helped him remember who and why he truly is and put the entire Earth life experience into perspective. And what he remembered coincided with ancient esoteric information, and he believes the after effects have similarities to going through a near-death experience. Roland is the author of Who and Why You Are. He is also a meditation workshop presenter and host of the podcast Conversations with Roland. You can find his website at www.rolandachenjang.com. And we'll spell that at the end of the show so people will know. Roland, welcome to NDE Radio.
Thank you for that introduction, Lee. And I appreciate it.
A quick question about Cameroon. There's a Mount Cameroon there, and I was wondering if before the Christians arrived, if that was considered a sacred mountain in any way.
So I would not know that for sure exactly, because that was way before I was born. And unfortunately, I have not looked at that history. Mm-hmm. But even today, to the local indigenous tribe in that area, it is considered a sacred mountain.
Well, I presume that because it's, mountains have this powerful effect on people and their imaginations and their faith as well. Tell us how your Catholic versus the traditional religions, the local religions you were raised with, conflicted with each other for you.
For me, primarily, the biggest conflict was the mere fact that it wasn't Catholic. That was it. My first exposure to anything metaphysical was my religious upbringing. And then when I started to learn about the folklore stories, it seemed to me as though it was not of the Christian teaching. And so the biggest conflict was, this isn't a good thing to partake in. This is bad. This should be avoided. Mostly used for basically doing harm to other people. Interestingly enough, Lee, there were times when people would use it to protect themselves as well. And so there was that additional confusion in that people would go visit witch doctors to seek protection for themselves against, some other person that was potentially using the same witchcraft to potentially hurt them.
Was there a name for that faith?
It wasn't a particular faith. There were different traditions throughout the different cultures within the country that practiced one form or another of what we would naturally call witchcraft.
And you turned to yoga and meditation to kind of clear your own mind and reconcile the different cultural effects that all of these different cultures were having on you between Cameroon and America and business school. I started at Columbia University School of Business. It lasted one semester. I personally couldn't stand it, but anyway. But then in your meditation, you had a Kundalini experience about 4 years after. Tell us about that.
Yes. So I really started what I called laying in my bed and listening to my body, which eventually turned into this meditation practice in 2013, 2014. And I didn't start it as a spiritual practice. It was a last-ditch effort to help me cope with working full-time and then going to business school. As soon as I started the practice, I started having this otherworldly spiritual experiences that scared the living crap out of me, Lee. They really made me very nervous, and I thought that I was literally possessed by, quote unquote, the devil. But I kept at the practice because after every session of sitting and paying attention to my being, is what I would really call it, my physical body, my mind, my thoughts, my breathing, I would feel very good at the end of it. Yes. What usually stopped me was the unusual experiences. If it went to a level that I had not previously encountered, I would stop and then come out freaking out and breathing really heavily. But then after I calmed down, I felt very good. And that was that was like wood for the fire to keep going back and doing the practice. And I kept at it for many years. And on August 21st, 2018, I woke up, had this very intense message and knowing to literally go and meditate that morning. Don't brush your teeth. Don't pass go. In invoking monopoly here was the message. Go right now and meditate. So I did. And whilst meditating, I adopted this yoga pose. And in holding the pose, I felt a burst of energy in the base of my spine. And as soon as the energy burst, it moved right up my spine to the crown of my head. And that occurred in three distinct waves. And with each wave, I remembered a huge amount of information, which is what I have ended up writing and publishing as my book, Who and Why You Are, All You Need to Remember.
Mm. You have a lovely little animated cartoon, I guess I'd call it, on your website of that experience and how at the end of it, you just went out and it looked like you were blissfully aware of the entire world. And in a conversation that you and I had not a couple days ago, you said, and I took it that you drew this from your experience, all Earth is like an illusion designed to expand consciousness. That's what's going on here. You pose yoga. The yoga pose led to a Kundalini experience, and you are spirit temporarily in a body or an avatar. But the duality makes you think it's us against them. Then you rise above it and you see the all. And I thought that was a lovely quote. I had to read it back to you. Did you find that? Does that pretty much match what the feeling was after you stepped out of doors and saw the light, as it were?
It did. I mean, that feeling, there were so many feelings going on within me in the 7 minutes that all of this transpired in. I mean, besides remembering that all of Earth life is this beautiful, magnificent illusion designed to help consciousness know itself better, I also felt in that moment like the butt to the best joke ever told. Because up till then, I had been taking life so seriously, and I know many of us do. But once you remember that it's all for play, really, even amidst all the pain and suffering that we are all experiencing to different degrees in our own ways, I just couldn't help it but laugh. I was laughing, I was crying, I was confused, but I felt so much love and so at peace with my entire life's experiences and the circumstances I found myself in that moment. It's a tough feeling to really describe because, again, at the same time, standing in my doorway everything looked like the same thing. My car looked like my car, but it was way more than my car. It was basically this intelligence allowing me to drive from one place to another in what I would, in my mind, feel like, oh, that's a safe way to travel. And everything else, there was just way more to it than I believed right up until I had my awakening. So the trees were alive, the wind was alive, the clouds were alive, my doorway was alive, my hands, my sheets. I mean, everything was. I was on a high. I couldn't work the entire week after that. I really couldn't. I was like manically happy, too joyful to function, really.
Wow, that's wonderful. All aspects of consciousness: the car, the tree, the house, the yard.
Yeah.
All. You're probably familiar with the Matrix movies.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Everything else took on an entirely different meaning for me after going through this experience. It's made me appreciate that because this intelligence is literally unfolding itself and experiencing itself in myriad ways in every single thing that exists. If you look at it with a fine-tooth comb or with this from this perspective, you'll find a creator in it. So the Matrix is a very good example.
Now to turn to another page in your life, I learned from your own podcast that you went down to Costa Rica to Rhythmia and experienced what you were calling plant medicine, which is ayahuasca. And I wanted to ask you, because you've studied pharmacy, what makes ayahuasca work?
That's a good question. The best scientific explanation I can provide, and I am in no way an expert on ayahuasca. I just want to say that, but it's that it works on the same receptors that like LSD or DMT would work on, and in the layman's terms, it helps you experience a more expansive reality. So aspects of yourself that you're otherwise closed off to, this lets you peek behind that veil in a very nice, safe environment, and usually in what you would call a spiritual or religious type ceremony.
Except it affects the body pretty violently, doesn't it? I mean, you've got the runs, and you're throwing up at some point in the adventure.
Yes, and that aspect to it, it's not necessarily the pharmacy side of it, even though I can't explain it any more than that. But a lot of the purging has to do with the release of what you will call emotional pain. And it's very odd that it happens as vomiting or diarrhea. It's particularly even more odd because prior to partaking in an experience like that, you usually go through a cleanse and you're not eating very much food. And so your bowels, your colon is pretty much clean, just like you were going for a colonoscopy or something. But oddly enough, while you're going through an experience like that, if you end up healing some emotional pain, part of the release is purging, either vomiting or going through diarrhea. Some people cry, some people laugh. There's so many ways that it happens.
The experience, as you described it, took 4 nights. And you said on your first night, you had some visitations from beings that you couldn't see, but you could feel their presence. And there was a lot of energy work in the root chakra that night. And then you walked outside, and you had the urge to look up at one point. When you looked up, you heard voices saying, basically, we're with you. There were beings that saw you, and there were a bunch of them. You said a bunch of folks, and they were looking out for you. What do you take those to be angels, or how did you figure that one?
So to this day, I have no idea if they were angels or members of my soul tribe or part of my guides. I have no idea. But it was a very vivid experience. I mean, I was out in the lawn and I had, again, a sudden urge to just look up at the sky. And while I did, I heard basically a confirmation and acknowledgement of my presence right where I was, and that I wasn't alone and I was, supported. It wasn't like the Kundalini awakening. And while all of that was happening, I had the crazy urge to lift my hands up. And when I did, I received this beam of just loving energy come right and hit me in my chest and an abdominal area while my hands were up. And I was able to then bring that to heart center. And I felt, it felt as though it was a familiar group of people that knew who I was and where I was. And I thought, oh, okay, cool. Why are you guys up there? Come down and say hello or something. And of course, while at Rhythmia, they never did so. But yeah.
Wow. And, yeah. I'm glad you compared it to the Kundalini, because that's basically what I wanted to see how these two experiences differed. But I think it was. Well, go ahead.
Yeah,
talk about that.
I'm happy you asked that. They definitely differed. One of the reasons I actually decided to partake in the experience was because my ego crept in while I was in Sydney, Montana, and 3 months or so after having had my spiritual awakening. My ego basically thought, okay, I taught myself to meditate, and then years later, I have this spiritual awakening and I remember all this information. So I had my doubts about the validity of the information, particularly because, again, from my culture or how I was raised, coming from West Africa and Cameroon, meditating is really a taboo. Sitting down and paying attention to your thoughts in, either the lotus position, or even if you're not in a lotus position, is not something or an activity that we're raised to partake in. It's more of Eastern traditional beliefs. But the mere fact that I taught myself how to do all of this without a guru, and I was having all these experiences, and I was successfully, I would say, assimilating the experiences. And I say successfully because I was still, working as a pharmacist and just being productive in society in that regard. After I had the awakening and I'd written a chunk of my book, my ego crept in, like I said earlier. And I just thought, let me go to an environment where I can partake in a spiritual ceremony like this, and then go deeper without just my self-taught meditating practice, and then see what else I can learn. And that was my, essentially, that was my motivation to go to Rhythmia. And while I was there, I basically got confirmation of what I had learned. I healed a lot more emotional pains that I had not otherwise healed by just meditating. But then the biggest message I got from partaking in plant medicine ceremony was ultimately that when you partake in plant medicine ceremony, what you're doing, Roland, is going outside of yourself to find out who you are. And what you really need to do is remember that that information has always been, and will always be within you. So going and partaking in Rhythmia ultimately helped me validate, I'm not saying that word properly, validate that ideally, a meditation experience is best, and that's what I've kept doing.
You said on night 2, a big part of the night was remembering or experiencing hell, and you said it was like deja vu. It was, and then I think in our conversation you said hell is experiencing the same thing over and over and over. Tell us about that.
Yes. So. With my Kundalini awakening, I remember that hell was knowing or attaining an expanded level of awareness but refusing to use that awareness to grow. And so for me, the way it happened on night 2 at Rhythmia was I was laying in my bed and I would wake up and hear a bunch of sounds. And if anyone has ever partaken in plant medicine ceremony, the sounds are usually people vomiting, screaming, laughing, crying. The background music is absolutely amazing. I mean, it's such beautiful music. People are walking all over the place, wearing different colored clothes. And to me, it looked like the juxtaposition of people wearing white and then people wearing dark clothes. And that scene just kept repeating. So I would get up and I would see the exact same thing, hear the exact same sounds. The music would basically be on a loop. And I would think, oh, I just experienced this. And then I would say, okay, this is ridiculous. Then I would fall back asleep and then get right back up and experience the same thing. And every time that this was happening, the frequency of the music kept increasing. So the notes would go up another scale. So it was like climaxing and climaxing and climaxing. And then at some point, it just dawned on me that, oh my goodness, this is what hell is. I know better than this. I don't need to pretend as if I've not recognized this. There's no need to go back to sleep. Just recognize it for what it is. And as soon as I had that realization, the scene shifted. And then everybody went back to just continuing the actual journey to, if they were going to the bathroom or going back to your bed or maybe vomiting or whatever they were doing, the scene continued. But what was particularly odd was that everybody else was going through their own unique experience, and it did not necessarily involve what I perceived. So that was my own reality that I was experiencing at that time. And as soon as I realized it, the music changed. It stopped climaxing, and then it just continued back to the next song and everything. And it's as though they were waiting for me to realize this before they moved on. But that would be me seeming very egoistical to say the entire experience was dependent on whether or not I recognized hell or not to move on. So, but yeah.
You said night 3 was your favorite, and I guess on night 3 you learned that we all make our own choices and we all have to fix them. Like we all have to rebalance the choices, and every choice we make is a teach-learn opportunity. And then you went on a little later and said, what you do is teaching. What you have to do is try to save yourself, because in that process you're teaching everybody who's observing you. You're giving them an experience of learning that they can apply to themselves, even though your experience is quite individually your own and not theirs, but they will learn from it anyway. And I had this image as you were speaking that it was like a collective experience, that we're all part of the same unit of being, and that, if your right hand learns something, your left hand is learning it too.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a very good analogy. Again, this intelligence that is the source of everything is everything. There is nothing that isn't the intelligence, and there's nothing that can exist or be that isn't the intelligence. You talk about your body. I mean, your body is a functioning, cohesive, intelligent machine because every part of it has a purpose that isn't trying to overtake another purpose. Your hands aren't trying to walk like your legs. You use them for something else. But imagine if you just woke up one day and your hands were like, I'm not going to work as my hands anymore. I want you to use your hands to be able to see, or maybe empty your bowels or something like that. You would think that that's odd. And so all of humanity is basically playing the same role for the infinite all. In each of our uniquenesses, we are helping every other part of the entire existence grow and expand and evolve. And if we know ourselves and we are expressing ourselves to the degree that we are very aware of who we are, then we're helping every other person. When we're not sure and we're trying to still get to know ourselves, or if we are existing well below our potential, then we are, unfortunately, but not permanently, we're not supporting every other person as best as we can. And I don't want to say unfortunately as though it's a bad thing. It's not. It will always reconcile and fix itself and balance eventually. But we'll best serve as pieces to a puzzle by being the best piece that we can be.
Oh. You said in that same show that a month later you were back in your apartment at home, and one morning you were meditating and these 4 beings showed up. And you said, I could see them with my eyes wide open, like standing. I mean, they were right there. Mm-hmm. They looked just humongous, larger than life. And I had just interviewed someone the other day, really, who had, when she saw angels, they were like 15 feet tall. And I was wondering if that was sort of the idea that you got from this visit that you had.
Yes. Earlier when you asked me if I knew who those beings were at Rhythmia, and I said I had no idea, they never showed up at Rhythmia. When I was in my apartment in January in 2019, and these beings showed up, there were 3 of them. The feeling I got was, maybe these were the guys who saw me at Rhythmia. That was one of the feelings, but I never confirmed it. And I can't say that for sure. That's just a feeling. Mm-hmm. But these beings were humongously huge. They looked larger than life, but they looked just like me, like human. They were African American. They were wearing cut-off T-shirts and shorts. So they looked just like me going to play basketball. But they felt very familiar. I did not know their names at all. But they just felt familiar, like I knew them. And what was really interesting is that they showed up through a doorway in my apartment in a place where there is a wall. Like it was a wall separating my kitchen and my living room. And I was laying on the couch in my living room and this being showed up right through that door and proceeded to sit on the couch with me. And they took turns basically praising me again, telling me I'm doing well and telling me all these things about past lives. One thing I remember they said was, this is your 6th time here as a human. You've been a father twice prior to this. They mentioned my sister's name, which I have not asked her, so I'm not going to say it here on the show. They said I'd been very nice to her in previous lives and as well as this life, and I was very surprised that they knew her. But what was really odd was how they said goodbye when they were done hanging out with me, I guess. They asked if they could give me a hug, and I said yes. And so I lifted both my hands to hug me, and they basically laughed at me as in, no, that's not how we hug. And then they took turns looking at me in my eyes, which looked like they were looking straight into my soul, raised their right hands and put it on my right shoulder and basically acknowledged my presence and left. That was how they hugged. And I thought, wow, this is it seemed very like ancient Romanish, just looking at me and acknowledging my presence and my existence and then turning around and walking into the wall. I laugh because it sounds crazy, but of all the sort of fascinating spiritual experiences I've had, that's one I'll never forget because it felt very loving and very, very peaceful. And I mean, the beings were right there with me. And I cherished that moment. I still do.
Oh. Well, Roland, we're just about out of time for today, sadly. Thank you so much for sharing all of your experience at such a young age. You are, although when you said 28, Saturn makes a full return in astrology at the year 28 in our lives, and we review our entire previous life and move on from there. So that seemed Very appropriate. Roland, tell the audience how they can find your website and how they can get a copy of your book.
Absolutely. Yeah. So my website is rolandachenjang.com, and that's ROLANDACHENJANG.com. My book is available on my website if you want an autographed copy. If not, it's available through any other online retailer, paperback, audiobook, as well as the electronic format are available.
Terrific. Roland, thanks so much for sharing the story of your STE and your experiences at Rhythmia. And I'm not encouraging people to go. Your guest on your podcast, who probably wouldn't mind my mentioning her first name is Hope, said, I would not say it's a super fun experience. I think they need to be cognizant of the fact that it's going to be a really difficult time. So with that warning, we'll bring the show to an end. But thank you so much. And for folks who'd like to listen to this show again, just go to NDE Radio and hit the past shows button. And for more about IANDS, you can check out their website at iands.org. And listen again next Monday, 11 a.m. Eastern, for more NDE Radio. This is Lee Witting saying thanks for listening.